Hello. I'm going to talk to you just briefly about the course I have in mind in learning remedies, learning Materia Medica. And I'm going to share with you my approach that I have found most interesting and engaging for me. So what I'm going to do is switch over here to a slide so I can show you the information that I am thinking of using as a foundation here. What I have found easiest to engage my mind in this study is to start with cases that show that the remedy has acted satisfactorily, of course. And so I've learned much of the knowledge and ability that I've acquired, to the extent I have, from studying the older cases of the historical figures, Kent and Boninghausen and Lippe and others, as to how they approached cases and how they learned. So the method I'm going to propose here is to start with that. Start with, well, how the patient was treated successfully, and how that then leads to questions that engages the mind in understanding the remedy. So here's an example. And this is a case from Henry Guernsey, so back in the 1800s. And it's a case of dysmenorrhea, terrible, painful menstrual discomfort and pain. And he said a great variety of symptoms presented themselves. So you can appreciate right away how this would be a challenge. Sometimes in a case we have so much information that it does seem somewhat overwhelming and difficult to know really what to select out, what to emphasize in deciding our prescription. But Guernsey says here, I was much struck with the devout, beseeching, earnest, and ceaseless talking of the patient, and at once suggested to the attending physician the use of stramonium. Now, I'm emphasizing this particular line because I think you can relate to this, where you have been struggling with a case, trying to understand it, trying to find the right remedy, to have someone in just a very short time, perhaps even, a few seconds, say, oh, the remedy's obvious. It's actually kind of annoying. But what this represents is a knowledge, both knowledge of Materia Medica and an ability to recognize what's important in the case. So the other homeopath, it goes on to say, upon comparing symptoms, he replied, all the symptoms were not under the description of stramonium, but he agreed to use it as he couldn't think of anything else to do. And he added that if it cured her, he would cease to believe in the doctrine of totality. So you see what we have here is a method that this homeopath had developed based on the idea of totality. But it really wasn't working for him. At least in this case, it wasn't working for him. And there was something to learn here. Guernsey responds to say, I replied that stramonium was undoubtedly the remedy, and if it were properly proven on every variety of temperament and condition, then all of her symptoms would be found to be there. And so he felt quite confident, obviously, that it was just a question of the proving not being quite complete enough. So stramonium 200C was given, and the result was it quieted her at once, and all of her other symptoms speedily vanished inversely as they had appeared. Her peculiar talking was the last symptom to manifest itself, the first to disappear, and Guernsey says when present in disease in either sex is a keynote to stramonium. So this next slide here shows where this study takes me, trying to understand the remedy, understand what it covers, what's important about it, what its reach is. I look in these different areas. I look at the repertory to see what rubrics the remedy's in. I look at Materia Medica, of course, more than one. I look at keynotes, Lippe's Red Line Symptoms, for example, or Guernsey's keynotes rather. Provings, oftentimes, more difficult to access, but a surprising source of useful information. And then cured cases, besides this one, other cases in the literature. And lastly, to compare with other remedies, because it's necessary to see how this remedy under consideration is different than others that seem very similar to it. Here's another example. This is one of Kent's cases, James Kent. It's a woman, 76 years old, that's in a memorial home. I think probably what this is sort of like a nursing facility for older people, or it might be a hospice situation. I'm not really sure, but from his description of some of the cases, it sounds like they were all elderly and near the end of their life. This particular woman had severe dropsy, edema, and also was asthmatic. And he says the urine was loaded with albumin, with protein, and she apparently was going to die soon without any, he says, interruption, in other words, without any pausing. He then prescribed, as you see here, arsenicum, apis, apicinum, and lachesis with some relief. And I think all of these remedies probably you can relate to as remedies for severe dropsy, but it's interesting of those remedies listed, only lachesis gave some relief. He says, and relief does not mean cure, of course. Finally, he says, she was becoming very large. Her hands, her face, her limbs, her abdomen were all edematous. And since lachesis did give some relief, he decided not to tap, not to take fluid off of her body with a needle. Though she had taken medicine at proper intervals, when there seemed to be a demand to repeat it, there seemed to come a time when there was no benefit from the remedy. The suffocation after sleep was the special symptom that guided the lachesis, and what he used was 41M. So I'm emphasizing this paragraph here because we're seeing that here in an elderly person near death, Kent's using, I guess we would call it a high potency. It's close to 50M, and he's using it more than once, and he's only getting partial effect from it. He's not describing an aggravation. He's not describing any particular change in the condition, but just some temporary relief that then is followed eventually by lack of relief. So this is an example of palliation. So he has to find a different remedy. And then he says one morning he was told that she had suffered very greatly during the night with pains in the feet and legs, and her feet were starting to turn black. The person caring for her thought she was going to die and gave her some whiskey, I guess, to ease her last hours. And the great pain in the feet and legs turning blacks, perhaps threatening gangrene, he thought. So he looks at this. He says arsenicum and lachesis had failed, which seemed like the more obvious remedies, and that they had failed guided him to tarantula cubensis, which was given in a 12x dose. And the result of that was the pain subsiding immediately, the dark color of the skin and legs becoming bright red, and in general, she felt improved and got up from her bed. The next night she slept well until toward morning. When pain in the lower limbs returned, they repeated tarantula cubensis 12x with perfect relief. So this is remarkable. When I read something like this last paragraph here, where remedies in the higher potencies have been used, and they were palliative. And then a remedy, even though it's an unusual remedy, what strikes me almost is kind of stunning is it's given 12x and has this amazing effect. It may be 12x is all he had available, very possibly. It's not that common a remedy. So maybe that's why it was used in low potency. And he may have used it higher if he had it. We don't know. I too have had cases where I've used a low potency and seen it act for a very long time. But it's always kind of startling to see this and really emphasizes to us the importance of finding that specific remedy that's needed. So this is enough perhaps to get you some idea of the kind of approach that I have used, where I start with a case like this last one or the one before, that leads me to a series of questions that I have to answer. How was this remedy recognized? How did Kent or Guernsey see that so readily? Obviously, they knew Materia Medica, but also they knew what they saw in the patient indicated that remedy. So then I go with those questions in mind to the study, to the repertory, Materia Medica, to the provings, and I try then to understand the answer.